Hi, my name is Jess Kinnick, and this is my special education interviews for Module 3. So the faculty that I interviewed was my principal, Mrs. Magner, one of my two special education teachers in the building, which is Mrs. Riesman. She is more for the severe needs side of SPED for our building, and then a para aide, Mrs. Turner. She's been there. She's got 15 plus years experience. So diving right in, our first question was about child find procedures, screening and identification, and all three of them kind of said the same thing. This happens right in the pre-K department, so many times using child find and their procedures, this happens early on. Our pre-K building is known as Bella, and my principal said they've done a great job with communicating. If they miss, they get in the home, they go to the home, they see the parents, they do a great screening job. Mrs. Riesman said the exact same thing, kind of redundant. Mrs. Turner had a little different take on it. She's not as familiar with the child find procedures, but she does feel that many times there's people that are missed, feels the process is delayed, takes too long to identify kids, and especially ones that have not been here for pre-K if they come in new. Most challenging part for a principal, SPED department, and para. Mrs. Magner said the biggest thing she's having a hard time in is knowing all the laws. This is her fifth year, second year as a principal. She This really connects with Module 2 with what we learned about how many principals do not know the rules and regulations and laws for SPED. And she also said a trouble is making sure the SPED team and the psychologists are on the same page. That seems to be a pretty large issue in our building as well as the district, and I've seen it firsthand. For Mrs. Riesman, working as a team when they have different goals in mind. So again, kind of a team thing, running into different personalities, different goals, different ideas, and that can be a struggle. And then working with difficult parents, staff, and admin. Mrs. Turner, not being treated as an equal in the building. I think that's a common theme for paras. And then burnout. Because they're not necessarily working with the most ideal students all the time. That they're difficult students either through behavior or special needs or what it may be. That the burnout rate is very high. Advice, Mrs. Magner says, find a great team and make sure they're supporting them in what they need. Get comfortable with meetings because you're going to have a lot of them, and work with the greatest interest of the kid, not the staff. So just because the staff thinks maybe this is the easiest way doesn't necessarily mean that's what's best for the kid. Always have the kid's best interest in mind. Mrs. Riesman said, get a good support team around you. Don't try and know everything all at once. It's too much. Just try to do your job and baby steps. And get to know the laws and rules of SPED, which we all are very aware of, and know that that is an issue. And get training where it's needed. So don't be afraid to go to training on SPED laws, SPED rules, accommodations, modifications, wherever you need it. Mrs. Turner says, treat all workers with the same respect, keep all parties in the loop in MTSS and the IEP process, and then include paras in some ideas since they are the ones working with these kids on a regular basis. These kids, they know the kids best usually, so why aren't we asking them more? How do you work with regular ed teachers? So Mrs. Magner says go through the chain of command. So she'll go into special ed and then special ed to paras, or then she'll go to coaches and then coaches to teachers or teachers into paras. Go through the chain of command, don't skip people, and then through support and trust. Mrs. Riesman says help write and apply. She helps and write and apply accommodations through the IEP and also helps with modifications in curriculum. She also works with regular teachers to support them in their classroom during push-in, and then she's teaching the same material at a different modification in her room during pull-out. So she has to work very closely with regular ed teachers. Mrs. Turner, she's during push-in, she's working with that teacher a lot on what they're working in, so they have to have a pretty good relationship. She really wanted to emphasize to make sure that she is not in charge of discipline for the SPED students. She is just there for help. She is not there. It is still the teacher's classroom, the teacher's rule, the teacher's responsibility. And then she's only responsible for the assigned student and students. I think we see a lot where a para comes in the building and she goes, oh, hey, take this group, or oh, hey, help this kid. That's not their responsibility. Their responsibility is to their assigned kid for their assigned goals and procedures. How to work effectively with parents. Mrs. Manor says, work very well with parents. Set goals, parents agree with them, and then keep them in communication with them. They are a team and included in all parties and all decisions. So she has to have a great relationship with parents, or else, especially in the SPED department, we can have serious problems. Mrs. Reisman, one simple word: communication. That's the only way to work effectively with parents, to get things done and to all be working in the same directions. Communicate. She texts. I've watched her do it. She texts her parents on a regular basis. Hey, where's so and so today? Boom, she's got her phone out. She's texting them. They have a great relationship. Mrs. Turner says most of the time there's not a lot of communication between paras and teachers. Most of the time that happens with either a teacher, or I'm sorry, a para and parents. She wishes there was more because she works with those kids the most. She says when she sees them, she tries to talk to them, but most of the time during meetings, IEPs, things like that, she's not really involved. Advice for first-year admin. Mrs. Manor says, get to know your SPED laws very well. Make sure you have a good relationship with your special education director, and then create a good team for support. Mrs. Reisman, try not to run and know everything. Just try to do what you do best and have a support staff to help you in those areas that you're weak in. Stick up for what you believe in and what you want to try to accomplish, and make sure you include everyone in that process. Mrs. Turner says, get the input of all parties that work with the kids before accommodations, modifications, and behavior plans are created. Her common theme is just paras are not included in some of these major decisions, and they don't feel that they have a voice when they should, because they are the number one source, in my opinion. They're working with those kids one-on-one every day, and in some cases all day. Why are they not getting more of an opinion, more of input? Just because maybe they're not certified. I don't know, but I agree with Mrs. Turner very much. How do you describe the role of the SPED teacher, or I look at it as like the principal, the SPED teacher, and the para? Mrs. Manor, in the form of SPED, she attends SPED meetings, IEP, and MTSS conferences. She makes sure that everyone is compliant with all the SPED regulations, and then she makes sure kids are making necessary growth, so they're watching those goals. They meet every Friday, and it's more of housekeeping items, but they also keep an eye on where people are with those goals and making sure everyone's tracking those goals. Working your way down the chain, Mrs. Reisman is to manage her paras and make sure they're meeting the kids' needs, and then to identify the goals and monitor them, and Mrs. Magner, or principal, monitors her monitoring, and then to work as part of the SPED team, and then to write IEP and learning goals. Very important. It's hard to write those goals, because if those goals aren't met, we're starting to see through some Supreme Court cases that there are very big consequences. Mrs. Turner, para job is to support the kids and their specific needs. There's no cookie cutter method. Each kid learns differently. Each kid needs different things, so you have to learn to adapt on the go. And then she holds kids at a high standard of learning. What characteristics do you look for in new admin? Mrs. Magner said, be familiar with different SPED models, inclusion, pull-out, and a combination of both. Know the differences between accommodations and modifications, very big difference, and which can catch you. You can find yourself in trouble if you don't know the difference. And up on modern research on closing educational gaps that we're learning in our building, and we're doing book studies in some of that stuff, and there's a lot of stuff out there that's can kind of save you in some pain and effort. Mrs. Reisman says, look for the best interest of the kids, not the staff. We've heard that before. Inclusion is everything. That's her number one thing. Her kids need to be included, especially some of the severe kids. Inclusion is she's all about being real world ready and being lifelong learners. And so if they're included, that is setting them up for success to be real world ready. Doesn't need to know all the rules and laws, but instead have faith in your staff and support them. I think that's big. She's been around for a long time. She knows that a new admin is not going to know everything and shouldn't know everything, but in return, don't pretend to. Look to your staff and support your staff to help you with those areas. Mrs. Turner says she looks for a trustworthy admin, looking one that looks out for the best interest in the kids, has a lot of common sense, is responsible and organized. What is the most rewarding part of each of these jobs? They all kind of have a common theme. When Mrs. Miner said, when there is a plan in place and the plan works, and we see our kids growing both in an educational and a social sense, those plans sometimes, as we know, don't work out great. So they're really trying to make sure they do, and when they do, it's awesome. This is the reason it was the same thing when our kids are included in what's going on in class. Inclusion for her is huge. When this is through the kid's choice, not the teacher's choice, and when they're successful. And same thing for Mrs. Turner. When they've been working on a skill over and over and over and over for a long period of time, and all of a sudden the light bulb goes on. She says it's amazing. So this was pretty cool. I got to the paras and the special education department was really caught off guard that I wanted to interview them. They really took the time and looked at some of the questions, and I recorded them. A couple of my meetings were almost half hour to an hour long. They really wanted to do their best because they don't feel always that they have a voice and that people don't really care and then they're not part of the team. So I thought this was a really cool thing. I let Mrs. Reisman and Mrs. Turner have a voice, and I even shared this PowerPoint with them, and I think this was a really cool thing. And it made them feel that I care, which they know I already do, but it's good to get the different perspectives from everybody. So last but not least, my standards address was ISTE 3C, to promote a model of effective communication and collaboration among stakeholders using digitized tools. We're communicating, we're talking, we're doing our thing. And PSEL 7E, develop the support open, productive, caring, and trusting working relationships among leaders, faculty, and staff to promote professional capacity and the improvement of practice. Not only have I done that through this, but I did that through them. Communicating, collaborating, showing, sharing ideas was huge. So hope this helps. Hope you all have a great day.